Hey, I finally watched a movie last night because it was available on demand that I realized that I haven't seen before, and that's the original Death Wish from 1974.
Oh wow!
So I mean, it's so strange.
Movie.
I mean, I know all about Death Wish. I know its implications. I know its cultural, how it resounds in the culture and how controversial it was. And I've seen Death Wish 4 of all movies because I remember my uncle took me to a double feature one night of Missing in Action 3 and Death Wish 4. It was like a canon double feature. So anyway, so I remember that. But I'd never seen the original Death Wish. So I watched it, and I said, man, this is a true exploitation film, because what they do is they throw in every kind of incendiary possibility they can, and they to see what sticks. And, you know, there's that scene where everybody's talking about the vigilante, and he's walking through a party, and he overhears a conversation where a guy says, "Have you noticed that all of them are black?" And the woman's like, "Well, most muggers are black in New York," and it's like every kind of like incendiary, like, but fascinating all the same. And I was so like torn between this movie is completely silly to well, this movie is actually kind of smart because it wears that exploitation on its sleeve, and it's in the best way in that it is primal. It is connecting to something primal.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately, what he does is like in revenge for what happens to his family.
But what really shocks me is there's no direct revenge, because you fully expect him to seek out the people that committed the crime against his wife and daughter, but he doesn't.
He doesn't. He just goes after bad people, what he considers to be bad people, who are really. But yeah, he doesn't get the actual rapist or whatever. That's a really shocking scene. That movie came out like at the time when All in the Family was on television and stuff. So all of the discussions about some of that stuff that goes on was going on in the number one television shows. It just took a darker take on it, really.
Right.
And it was like, what would happen if Archie Bunker got a gun and went out and settled things on the streets?
That infamous episode of All in the Family where Edith gets raped.
Yeah.
I mean, All in the Family kind of went there, and I just watched that episode again on YouTube the other week, and I was like, that's kind of an awkward episode.
It is.
Well,
in a major
great.
way.
You bring up. That's a great point, though. What we're all talking about. You're talking about things at a time. There was a time in this country, and it's just because everything's changed technology-wise and everything, where the whole nation it talked about that episode of All in the Family. I mean, that was a big, or the one where he got a gun, and I'll never forget the one where he bought. Remember Archie Bunker after when he's a grandfather, he bought the kid a toy machine gun, and Sally Struthers was like, "Are you nuts?"
Yeah.
I mean, there's a time, these were big, and if you did that on the show, any of these things on the show today, just because we're so splintered and fractured now.
Everybody
have the same.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have the same.
You couldn't have a show like that now.
No,
but what's amazing?
Nothing shocking about it. That's a bad thing.
But what's amazing about All in the Family, I guess we don't really want to talk about All in the Family too much. But what's amazing about All in the Family is that show, when you watch it again today, like any given episode, there's somehow that it takes place in the 70s and everything, but somehow what they're talking about has not changed one iota, especially politically.
Politically, nothing's changed. That's very frightening about that.
It's absolutely the same. Like the same arguments are going on now. It's amazing how.
It's funny. Nothing has changed. Yeah.
In terms of Death Wish, I mean, things have changed. Because Death Wish is a particular view of New York City at that time and for many years after. I mean, I think the one of the greatest portraits of New York City at that time is Taxi Driver that came out 2 years later. But it's playing in that same sandbox. I mean, the New York City of today, crime has never been lower.
And it looks none of New York now looks anything like the New York of that time period. You know?
No, nothing.
And you think Dog Day Afternoon came out the year after Death Wish, another portrait of New York, another portrait of a kind of antsy unrest among the people against the authority in New York. I mean, it came out on the heels of the prison uprising. I mean, that's why that most famous scene, Attica, in Dog Day Afternoon, which wasn't in the script. Pacino said that, like, this crew member just walked up to him and said, "Yell out Attica" to the crowd and see what they do, and thus was born, like, one of the infamous scenes of all time. You know, one of the great scenes. So it's really a valuable time capsule, like a movie like Death Wish, because as silly and exploitative as it might be, it did come from a real place and a real fear, and that's what it tapped into, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very dangerous city at that time in that time period. You know, like from the late '60s to the early '80s, even, and so it was. It was also a city that was, had gone bankrupt. The morale in the city was at an all-time low, and it really took, a big major thing. I saw a documentary called "Run for Your Life," a few years ago, maybe a decade ago, which was about the beginning of the New York Marathon. And there was the marathon. The New York Marathon was something that actually pulled the city together and actually helped overcome that feeling of just the terrible feeling that city was sinking into.
No. I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question, though. When our first year, two movies obviously inspired by Death Wish came out. Well, at least one of them. I don't know if the other one might have been the year after. But there are two noticeable vigilante films. The Kevin Bacon one, Death Sentence.
Right.
And then the Jodie Foster one, the Jodie Foster one, The Brave One.
Yeah.
And in neither of those films really, Death Sentence is a little bit better because it doesn't pretend to be anything else but an exploitation film that's influenced by those exploitation films of the 70s and 80s.
Well, if you remember when Death Sentence came out, I mean, Death Sentence is written by the guy that wrote Death Wish, and we had him on.
Yeah, that was a great. That was a great
about
episode.
it. And then The Brave One, I did watch The Brave One like maybe a year ago. It's just, I think the slant is somewhat different now because now it has to do with the attorneys and the courts and how they don't care about the victims. I mean, I can see a vigilante movie coming out of that dynamic now.
And there was one a famous exploitation film that came out in the mid '80s, Vigilante, that came out that was very anti-attorney, actually, if I remember.
Then there was also the Star Chamber. Do you remember that? With
Michael Douglas movie
with Michael Douglas. Yeah. The Peter Hyams movie.
In Death Wish, it's not necessarily. No one does him wrong. I mean, it's not like anybody lets him down.
Right.
It's not like they had the guys and they had to let him go, or anything like that. It's just this feeling of just being fed up and wanting to empower yourself against the scum of the earth. And it's amazing to me how every single time he goes out, he's mugged, or he's like, the movie should be retitled "The Unluckiest Bastard on the Planet" because he's going to step out of his apartment.
Yeah, right.
But what a fascinating presence Charles Bronson was. Just nobody looked like him, or what was he? Was he an Eskimo or something? What was his
Charles?
He was
Polish. Bodansky.
Yeah.
Charles Bodansky.
Buczynski, yes.
Buczynski, thank you. No, he was. It's funny. For years, I only knew him from those exploitation movies. and then you go back and you watch Once Upon a Time in the West, The Great Escape, all these old great movies that he was in. But unfortunately, my generation only knew him from Death Wish and the White Buffalo. How can I forget the White Buffalo? I should forget the White Buffalo, but
I mean, yeah. I mean, he was interesting during that time period for sure. I mean, you know, and also trying to do things like international thrillers, like Telephone, or you know,
which is not a bad movie. A Terrence Young film.
Yeah,
Terrence
not
Young,
bad.
Not a bad movie actually.
The Mechanic. That's another one that he did that I like.
I actually think of all those films.
That's the best
all those
one.
later films, that's one of the best ones. That's classic.
And also, he also did a great movie with Walter Hill called Hard Times, where he was a
magnificent movie.
Yeah, where he was a boxer in the 30s, a bare-fisted boxer. But yeah, I mean, he was quite unusual. And I mean, when you think about, like, it's funny when you started talking about Death Wish, and then you mentioned Vigilante, and then I started thinking about that how many of these movies actually came out in the wake of Death Wish. Like there was Fighting Back with Tom Skerritt, and then there was one called Defiance with Jen Michael Vincent and Danny Aiello in an early role.
When was Walking Tall? When was Walking Tall? What year was that?
Walking Tall was 74.
Yeah, that's the mid-70s.
Yeah, that was around the same time, but that's of course more of a Southern thing and not a New York thing. I'm just thinking of the New Yorky ones. There was Night of the Juggler with James Brolin and
Clemenza.
Yeah, and Richard Castellano. And then there was a really great one that's like very obscure, but it's great. It takes place in Coney Island, and it's called Boardwalk.
Oh my God!
With Lee Strasberg and Ruth Gordon is an elderly married couple that he gets into the vigilante thing.
Hyman Roth, that's right. Hyman Roth is a vigilante. Yes.
Yeah. That's one of the movies that I would most want to see released.
Wasn't Joe, which was 1970? Wasn't that a vigilante movie? The John Avildsen movie?
Kind of. That's kind of one. Yeah. That's kind of like one of the progenitors of the genre, I think.
Progenitors. Oh my God! Listening to you two. That's a 10-point word right there.
Dude, right there. It's just like we just took our show to the next level.
But you know what I also